Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, my fellow panelists, distinguished guests, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. As the forum is brought to the close, may I take this opportunity to congratulate our hosts on hosting such a landmark event to explore the plurality of democratic models in our multipolar world. Ladies and gentlemen, after 2 long days of deliberation and presentation, I presume at this hour, nobody would ever deny that democracy is a shared asset, shared value of humanity. At the same time, neither should democracy be made a weapon, a geopolitical weapon, to stigmatize any specific country just based on the mode of governance. Democracy makes a relevant parameter for global governance. Nonetheless, there has never been a single model of democracy that suits all nation states, and this has been repeated by many speakers. The model of one size fits all is impossible. At the same time, ladies and gentlemen, neither would democracy serve as a panacea for addressing all challenges and problems in hand. Be that as it may, over the years, as the international community has generally accepted the definitions and norms of political systems propagated by the West, the Western model of liberal democracy has thus been made the sole benchmark of democracy, where universal suffrage and a multi-party, one man, one vote electoral institution have been touted as the cornerstones of democracy. Ladies and gentlemen, with the hegemony of global discourse power in hand, the West has successfully monopolized the right to interpret democracy worldwide. And this made the world an easy target of the West's weaponization of democracy. Time and again, regime change has been instituted against the administrations deemed undesirable to the West in the name of championing democracy. Sovereignty is ruthlessly overrun, though under the prevailing United Nations Charter-based rules, no single nation has ever had the carte blanche to impose its desired norms and policies on others with whatever justifications. Ladies and gentlemen, as democracy is a relevant parameter for global governance in the contemporary world, it is only fair that people's aspiration of a nation be granted with due respect by others in determining its own mode of governance. While we embrace people-centric governance embodied in democracy, peculiarity of the individual state's cultural norms and disparity in the level of development across the globe have to be taken cognizant of. Indiscriminate duplication of the electoral institutions professed in the West does not guarantee the success of democracy elsewhere. The fall of Kabul, after 20 years of the US-installed Western democratic rule, is a clear case in point. Ladies and gentlemen, repeated incidences of failures in the Western democratic rule have dawned upon us that the essence of democratic governance lies in not the installation of multi-party electoral institution, but more in its inclusiveness, be it in the process of decision-making or in the policy formulation and delivery. Currently, one man, one vote may have showcased the electoral democracy to a certain extent, but it is not without flaws. More so when gerrymandering is becoming a collateral norm that has been tacitly deemed a necessary evil in the practice of electoral democracy. The discretional weightage attached to the demarcation of electoral boundaries is by itself a form of skewed democracy. While the West placed due emphasis on the power of ballots in the name of practicing one man, one vote, the real participation of the electorate in shaping the nation's governance could hardly go beyond the electioneering process. Ladies and gentlemen, the post-election policy formulation is almost the monopoly of the legislators, and some of whom might be sheer novices, bereft of experience and knowledge of public administration. After all, populism is now the key determinant in any multi-party election, while meritocracy is unabashedly compromised. Having been deprived of the opportunities of participation, the electorate has more often than not had their aspirations ignored in favor of the partisan agenda, thus making the governance very much partisan-centric and not people-centric. This explains why, in many instances, legislators of some Western democracies choose to lock horns over petty partisan matters at the expense of the people's well-being and the taxpayers' monies. Filibuster in the American Congress is one of the glaring examples. By so doing, ladies and gentlemen, legislature is reduced to a mere theater of partisan power play, disconnected totally from the people at large. And on the other hand, ladies and gentlemen, the West, through its overwhelming dominance of international media, has never ceased to portray China as an autocratic state devoid of a Western-style multi-party electoral system. And at the same time, they find fault in the absence of a check and balance mechanism. Yet, the West appears clueless as to how a purportedly authoritarian government could ever command an overwhelmingly high level of public trust, public support for decades. A survey report, as was cited by one of our speakers this morning, titled, I quote, "Understanding CCP Resilience, Chinese Opinion Survey Through Time," unquote, released in July 2020, perhaps serves to puzzle the West further. Its author, Edward Cunningham of Ash Center for Democratic Governance and Innovation, Harvard Kennedy School, narrated in his finding that since the start of the survey in 2003, Chinese citizen satisfaction with government has increased virtually across the board, from the impact of broad national policies to the conduct of local town officials. Chinese citizens rate the government as more capable and effective than ever before. Interestingly, more marginalized groups in poorer inland regions are actually comparatively more likely to report increases in satisfaction, unquote. Ladies and gentlemen, of course, such a narration runs contrary to the predicted destiny of any authoritarian rule under the liberal democratic lenses. The sheer arrogance and prejudices of the Western political elites against anything alien or non-West have emboldened their resistance to any alternative form of democracy in the global political spectrum. A relevant case in point is a Chinese governance that has never been deficient of people-centric elements of democracy. But the West is persistently turning a blind eye to the inherent provision of consultation. I repeat the word consultation in the Chinese model of governance, which is in stark contrast to the norm of majority rule in Western-style democracy. Ladies and gentlemen, the Western-style democracy may appear to have latitude for dissent to a certain extent, but the end result of its decision-making process is winner takes all, regardless of the margin of majority. In contrast, the element of consultation dedicated to accommodating the minority views makes the Chinese model of consultative democracy even more inclusive in its outlook. Ladies and gentlemen, the high approval rating of above 90% in favor of the Chinese governance under the CPC rule, as was reported by Edward Cunningham in his survey, should rightfully be viewed as an overwhelming endorsement of the policy for Malaysian and delivery system under the CPC. After all, in the practice of democracy, it's the choice of people that counts. Level of the people's confidence in the governance is the best barometric measurement of how well their aspirations have been met in their respective countries. This certainly appears more democracy compliant as compared to a mere form of electoral democracy in practice. Ladies and gentlemen, while the world ushers in a new era of multipolarity, diversity of governance models across the ideological and cultural spectrum is anticipated and should be accepted with generous latitude for tolerance and inclusiveness. What's more, in the choice of democratic models, which has been pluralistic, the world is never the same as before. Amid the escalating aspirations and demands worldwide, ladies and gentlemen, we should be well poised to embrace a new mode of global governance characterized by the coexistence of different models of democracy. After all, democracy is no longer the monopoly beholden to any nation state, be it the reigning hegemon or otherwise. In closing, ladies and gentlemen, may I wish all genuine practitioners of democracy be truly committed to the cause of endeavoring in the interests of people in your various capacities and positions. Ultimately, it is whether the delivery of your policies enhances the well-being of the people or otherwise that matters. On this note, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your attention. Thank you.